Madam Chair, we are live.
Great, thank you so much. Hey folks, if there's anyone who's watching us in real time, you note that we're starting a little behind our scheduled start time. We are working on getting our ability to call in for public comment up and running. There is a technical glitch that our staff are working on. So thank you for being patient. And as such, once I get to the agenda, you'll see that we'll do our public comment only at the end today. So that by then we hope that the tech will be all up and running. So with that, hello everybody. I'm Maggie Ullman. I'm the chair of this committee. We are the Environment and Safety Committee of the City of Asheville. It's our May 20th meeting for 2024. We are all remote and all our staff and council women are participating virtually. To help y'all follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud and kind of mile mark as we go. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of our website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by calling 855-925-2801, meeting code 9477. As I mentioned, if you're having challenges with that, I'll make a notification. I'll share during the call when everything's all green light for that system. So welcome. I will start with roll call and then we'll dive into the agenda. So if y'all want to come off mute and say hello, that would be great. Welcome, Vice Mayor Sandra Kilgore.
Good afternoon.
As well, Councilwoman Smith.
Good afternoon.
Our City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Hello.
And I believe our Deputy City Attorney, John Maddox, is on the line.
Hello.
We also have our Development Services Division Director, Mark Bethaney.
Good afternoon, all.
We'll hear from Mark a little bit later. We also have our Noise Administrator, Todd Justice.
Hello.
And we also have our newly appointed Deputy Chief Ardema from the Police Department.
Good afternoon.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And we also have our Vice Chair of our Noise Advisory Board, Jessica Thomason.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome. Glad to have y'all. All right. So now that we've done roll call, let's shift over to our agenda. And we have primarily one topic today, but two different presentations. And it's around our Noise Advisory Board and our Noise Advisory Policy. Oh, what am I forgetting, Deborah?
We have one more staff person, Deputy Chief Chris Brzezinski from Asheville Fire Department.
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much.
I apologize for his name not being in the list. Thank you, Chief.
Pleasure.
I'm sorry.
Well, and in the excitement, I went off script and realized that our second agenda item is to actually approve our meeting minutes from April 23rd. So it's all good. So if we could have a motion to approve our April 23rd, 2024 meeting minutes.
Sandra, so moved. Second.
All right, we have a first and a second. I will do a roll call vote, as is our policy for virtual. So Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
Myself, aye. The motion passes. Thank you so much. Now on to item 3 is our Noise Advisory Board update, and Jessica will give us a presentation.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here today representing the Noise Advisory Board. Reb Hazlib could not be here today, so I am doing this in his place. So if we can, Katie, go to the next slide, please. So just a refresher of the Noise Advisory Board for those of you who have not been studying this every day. The mission of the Noise Advisory Board is to evaluate the effectiveness of the revised ordinance regarding noise regulation and related city policies with the goal of developing recommendations regarding amendments, additions, or deletions. The NAB will also evaluate the effectiveness of enforcement of the ordinance in regards to response times, compliance rates, distribution of complaints, and ensuring equitable outcomes. We will propose long-term objectives for achieving reduced levels of sound for our business and residential communities and propose means for implementing such objectives. Next slide, please. These are our recommendations for 2024. The first two are a continuation from the presentation we had last year, which is to conduct a public survey to assess the ordinance, address vehicular noise. In addition to those two things that we proposed last year, we would like to add a board member from the field of public health, and designate one of the 3 at-large positions for a multifamily housing representative. Other things that we'd like to have considered are to moderate construction hours on Saturdays in residential zones and address power washing and motorized equipment noise. Next slide, please. Okay, so first thing is to gather public input to assess effectiveness of the noise ordinance. Data compiled since the new ordinance was implemented does not show a year-to-year decrease in complaint numbers or in complaint distribution. So that was one of the things that we looked at. And so we believe that a citywide survey would provide useful insight into the collected data. The original city conducted community survey about noise garnered one of the city's highest levels of civic engagement. So this is something that I spoke about last year. I had tried to engage with some city staff in order to make that happen and just didn't get very far. And so this is one of those things that I feel like we have the data from people who are, complaining, and we've asked people, right? We've created all of these systems for people to be able to log complaints. And we really haven't seen a decrease in numbers. I think that there's a number of reasons for that, just especially where the complaints are coming from, as I'll talk about a little bit more with the multifamily housing and wanting to have somebody there. The highest number of complaints still come from residential, neighbor to neighbor. And so that's one of the reasons why we think that would be a good fit, but really to just get a better assessment of what the community as a whole thinks. Obviously, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so we do have, people who are complaining regularly about some of the same things over and over again, but it would be better to get a bigger sample size of what the overall, a higher number of people data-wise of how people feel the noise ordinance has worked since we implemented it. Next slide, please. Address vehicular noise. With support from the Public Safety Committee in 2023, the Noise Advisory Board had vigorously pursued measures to reduce vehicular noise from intentional engine revving and modified exhaust systems, but it's been somewhat of a fraught effort. So I feel like last year there was a lot of support from Environment and Safety Committee around this. It's been a little bit more challenging to actually make some of these things happen. So one of the things, talking to city employees, that having signs put up on existing signs doesn't seem like that's an option. Sandwich signs are illegal in city of Asheville, especially like the downtown area. And we've been trying to do some strategies with APD, but that's been difficult as well. So I always want to reiterate that we as Noise Advisory Board understand that noise is not the biggest issue that we have. But when it comes to finding points of leverage for us as a board to make impact for the community, vehicular noise was definitely one of those things. What I can tell you is that we drafted a letter that we've sent to Lieutenant McClanahan and had a couple conversations with him that were positive, just in terms of wanting to ask the officers on the downtown beat, while this isn't necessarily your first priority, of course, but if you are patrolling downtown and they do see, if this is something that comes up, then to be able to address it. And I do understand that there are other issues that also, that comes into in terms of pulling somebody over, what has to happen from that instance. And part of that is just because, again, it's only APD are the only ones that have the jurisdiction to actually pull somebody over in a moving car. So we just ask if maybe there's some way that we could get some help from the Safety and Environment Committee or from council leadership in regards to maybe seeing if we can't make something happen with some of these signs. Is there any questions so far on these first 2 issues of the survey and the vehicular noise?
Yes. Jessica, thank you very much for the presentation. But it was just something that you just said. I'm trying to figure out what you're asking public safety to do. You said we can't utilize signs. That was going to be one of the things that I, suggested. And it's like, I sort of still, I sort of do not understand what we can do. I mean, you're saying the things that you don't have any control over. What can we actually do to help with this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I appreciate that. So what I'm wondering is if there is something that can help in regards to, can we change that? Can we have a bigger conversation about those signs, for instance, on the existing signage that's downtown? So I know part of it.
But you just said we couldn't do that.
Well, the thing is the city doesn't want to do that. Okay. That's, okay. If that makes sense. It's like, it's not like, for instance, like the sandwich signs are one of those things that it's actually violating the city of Asheville ordinance, right? So that that's written in, I understand that's like, don't want to be violating our own ordinances, but we're just wondering if there's something that there might be with some support from, either council or city leadership that can, talk to the sign, those in the development services and the signage to say, hey, is this something that we can do on maybe this crossroads and this crossroads, that just have something that says that there is, being in, staying within the confines of what's in the noise ordinance for modified mufflers.
And Councilmember Kilgore, Mark Matheny will speak a little bit more to this as part of his presentation. So we'll actually kind of have a response to most all of what they are recommending.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I think given Deborah's comment, let's roll, because I think that we'll probably loop back on this with some other context. I think that'd be nice. Thanks, Jessica.
Gotcha. Next slide, please. Enhanced board representation. And so understand the effects of noise on human health and to better advise council on noise regulations and related city policies, the Noise Advisory Board recommends adding a board position to represent the field of public health. And with approximately 50% of all noise complaints coming from multifamily housing, Noise Advisory Board recommends that one of the 3 at-large positions be designated from a representative from multifamily housing. And I will say I did get an email this morning letting us know that we would need to put these requests into writing and then submit to boards and commissions committee. So I just received that information this morning. Next slide, please. Moderate residential construction hours. So with increasing numbers of large-scale housing projects being erected in existing residential neighborhoods, construction noise is affecting quality of life. We're starting to see more and more complaints with construction. The current ordinance allows construction to occur between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. We are making a recommendation to potentially reduce construction hours on Saturdays from 8 to 6 in residentially zoned districts. Next slide, please. Address equipment noise. And so part of this comes from talking to city staff and the noise compliance team in terms of increasing number of complaints around pressure washing and power equipment. And so they've brought this to our attention and feel like this is something that needs to change, which is the current ordinance does not adequately control the use of pressure washing and power equipment. So we'd like to recommend adding provisions to the ordinance that limit the use of high noise producing power equipment during nighttime hours, similar to construction. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Are there any questions or comments on the presentation, or do we want to kind of resume a broader conversation after we've heard from Mark?
Let's go to Mark.
Okay, that is great. So we will shift just to mile mark on our agenda into our fourth agenda item, which is kind of staff who's been working with the Noise Advisory Board and some of their ideas around what implementation and potential future ordinance changes could look like. All right, Mark.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you. Thank you, committee chair and committee members. Great to see everyone here. Appreciate your time to listen to us go through this. Kate, next slide, please. So some of the criteria pieces, the key takeaways, just had to open up with this. The weather's getting better. We're moving into noise producing season, right? But while we see a little bit of a ramp up, the numbers do look comparable to where we're at year on year. So the next item, as part of the update, the noise ordinance update, we had a couple of positions that helped with that, and we've basically looked at the value and really created. At that time, we created an individual, but now that we have basically a compliance team, we've looked at a better way to use our available resources. Additionally, updating the noise ordinance and fully developing the compliance team has helped us understand kind of where the makers come from, the categorization, and how to manage a lot of that. And then also we've identified a couple of amendments that will help, similar along lines what Jessica just identified. Next slide, please. A little bit of history. In 2019 is when we initiated the team and the process to actually start the noise ordinance. Our goal was to basically be done by October. And as we got about into that process, we realized what an undertaking it was, and so that extended on. And then the March of the following year, we had a change to our entire world. So COVID came in 2020, so that pushed things along additionally longer. But anyway, we continue to do that. That process included data communication, jurisdictional comparisons, community engagement, input from our variety of categorized noise producers from the industry, and basically anybody that we could find shaking the trees to come out. Ultimately, in 2021, we were able to adopt it, which further defined the categorization, created some decibel tables, had some territorial classifications, and that sort of thing. And we also adopted 2 new positions, a specific noise enforcement officer and a noise administrator. The administrator had multiple functions, so it was a supervisor position, and it also allowed us to fully develop that compliance team that is up and running and working so well and ever evolving and maturing. That compliance team includes our noise enforcement, our zoning enforcement, our minimum housing, as well as animal services. And
Councilmember Ullman, did you have a question?
Yeah, before you move on, when was the Noise Advisory Board created in this context? It was after the or when did we start that, or have we had it a while and then they went under this? Just remind me of the context of us having that citizen leadership.
Yeah, great question, because prior to that, we did have one, but it was an entirely different structure. And so this happened within this process, right? So the current function of the Noise Advisory Board happened with the update of the ordinance. And when the ordinance was adopted, that Noise Advisory Board was adopted at that same time.
That's helpful. Yeah, as I was reading the mission statement, Jessica, that you had, it very much seemed to be around like accountability of this recent conversation. So appreciate that context. Okay.
And next slide, Katie. You were one slide ahead, but that's okay. Glad to answer all the questions. So the adoption included the creation of the Noise Advisory Board. I'll save you a little bit of time. It's the exact same wording that Jessica got us on before, just evaluating kind of the function of the ordinance itself. Thank you. Next slide, please. And the next 2 slides, I included not necessarily for the data itself. The data is updated from our noise dashboard, which is always updated daily, if not multiple times a day. What I really wanted this one and the next slide to be is this one identifies the complaint received by source. So this is really how the complaints come in. I just wanted you guys to have an awareness of how this comes in, not necessarily the accumulation of data. We'll get to that in a minute. And then next slide, please. And then this one is the complaint type, right? This is the categorization of the noise, and this is where they all develop from. Jessica touched on this a little bit earlier. The residential is by far, our largest group. And once again, this slide primarily just to understand what the categorization of the complaint type is, not necessarily the data. And next slide. And I know I'm going to apologize ahead of time for two things on this. First of all, it's a little teeny tiny, and that's okay. I didn't really want you to read specifically the data. And then the other one is it's a little bit offset just because of how we capture the data. So the top two is basically January through May of 22 and 23. And that table, because that information is already there, that table goes all the way up to 200. If you look in the 2024, because May's not over, it only goes up to 125. So while it looks like it's significantly more, it's really just a visual. And the interesting thing with that is year on year, we're super close as to, and I'll just do the total calls, right? Not item by item, but total calls. Honestly, 22 and 23 were slap on the same data, right? As it just turns out, from May through the month of May, they both ended up at a total of 122 for 22 and 23 was 122 total by the end of May. And then we're on track with that. This year, we're about a little past halfway through May, and we're already at 93 total calls accumulation, right? And so, so there's a balance, right? And Jessica touched on earlier, it's not necessarily coming down, but it's also not all over the board as well. And I think a lot of that is due to the great work that the noise team does and the compliance team as a whole. A big part of this is education into the community as to what that first slide indicated with the graph is how do you reach out and how do you get a hold of us? Just making that easier to access, I think, helps a lot of us a great deal. And next slide, please. And so the noise enforcement officer, we touched on that, was developed along with the ordinance. It was prior to the compliance division. We had that vision of how we were going to do that, but we didn't have all the pieces in place. So that was still a progression. And it was also prior to a supervisor position for the compliance division. So we found a fantastic candidate for this, put them in place, and gave them some very general direction on the framework of it, and they've done a tremendous job for us up to this point. And when I say for us, I don't mean for us as a department. I mean for us as a community. So just a really good outreach. And we've identified, there's another step here to that. Instead of being a single individual trade or specialization, we've transitioned, or in the process of transitioning that into a zoning enforcement officer, which the slide I provided earlier shows the other different duties that they have as far as minimum housing and short-term and a variety of other things that our ordinance team, that our zoning enforcement team is doing. This allows a full range of all of our officers to have that, so we have additional level of coverage, as well as not isolating one person to do that. And what they've done is identified that we're going to do dedicated training because he's done such a good job of getting us to where we are. We also want to really do a defined training for the rest of the team. And we don't know what that period of time is yet, but it will be, a multi-month period of time. And it also allows them to fit within that zoning enforcement officer career progression plan that was recently developed this year. And next slide, please. So communication, we're about 3 years into it after the adoption, And we're always trying to find ways that we can get better. And we're finding ways that we internally can get better with this group, that the community can help, that we can outreach better to the community. Really, those are the primary connectors, is really the community to and from. How do we get info from them? How do we get information back? And of course, the board, Noise Advisory Board, staff, and our board liaison from council. And so we're trying to really fine tune what that looks like and find the advantages, what we're doing well, what we can do better, and what we're not doing great, and how to remove that or improve on what that is. And while we're in the communication, a different form of communication, we just, it was earlier this year, this spring, I just wanted to pop this in here. We had, and I'm sorry I don't have it on the slide, we've got and you guys have probably seen this, the National Community Survey, right? That came to Asheville. That's a 3 to 5-ish year survey that's from the National Community Survey. It's a partnership with ICMA, and it kind of that gold standard for all benchmarking across the U.S. And so noise was included. We have some input on where that is. So noise was included in there, the fact of a noise ordinance, and to that they have different sections of choices, and 1/3, just over 1/3, is about 36% identified that is essential or very important, and then just under 2/3, 62-ish%, 64% probably somewhat or not important. So there's that level of communication at both our local, but also relative to where that national standard sits. So I just wanted to throw that out there that now that we have that information. And next slide, please. We have also identified a couple of areas in working with Jessica and her team and Reb, and things that we found are becoming problematic. And there's a couple of definitions that we're going to pursue change to the ordinance, and they're both in definitions of commercial, industrial, and industrial zones. There's an overlap that's this being a little bit problematic in certain areas, right? There's a time when they're just we can't define. There's some of them that are in both, and so and that matters because of how that noise is identified in each of those different zones. And then the other one is really, what are we doing with these pressure washers and generators? There's a little bit of a nuance on that. They're not specifically construction, but they're also not. They occur outside of our normal operating or our daytime hours anyway. And they vary from the ones that you roll up to the ones that roll up in the back of a truck, and so they're in the right of way. That's a different section that we'd have to talk about than if they're on the property, on scaffolding, or on the sidewalk. So there's a couple of different little tweaks there that we run into quite a bit, and we're just trying to find a better way to define and create regulatory and enforcement on that. And next slide, please. And so back in summary, once again, we're coming into season. The numbers are looking similar to where we've seen in the past. Once again, I'll credit that a lot to communication, to access. Our noise enforcement officer, very effective, and we're just trying to bring that into a broader group that can provide that throughout the community. And the building of the compliance team has really helped a great deal in both that, but also identifying the items within noise and being able to pursue that regulatory requirement for that. And then we've addressed a couple of amendments that we want to work on. And I think that's the last slide, and glad to take and talk through any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. Before we go into discussion, I want to provide an update on public input. So public input is the tool that we use to take calls during our live stream and feed it into our YouTube. That tool at large is down right now, so we are not going to be able to take public comment through that tool. In lieu of that, if you would like to make comment, please email me directly at Maggie Ullman, MAGGIEULLMAN @avlcouncil.com, and that number or that email address is on the website as well. So let's just do it that way today. So email me directly. When we get to public comment at the end of the call, I'll just read off any emails that we have. I'm sorry we won't be able to hear your voice today, but hearing your message is the most important. So that's the method we'll use today. Okay. So, all right, now open for discussion, both around the conversation and information Mark was sharing, and any questions or comments for Jessica.
Well, my question is for Mark.
Mark, did you have something that you wanted to put in before we started discussing?
I do, but why don't we go ahead and you guys ask your questions? There's one feedback that I want to get back out there, but let's go ahead and take your questions that may come up during that time.
Okay. Well, we're sort of going to go back to what question I was asking Jessica. I know you said that you're in the process of working on some of the ordinance to actually, I think make some adjustments or whatever. And I was just wondering if that is something that is on the your agenda to actually work on signage as far as being a preventive way of, controlling the noise. Like, say, for instance, for loud mufflers, you'll be fined $500. Something that just sort of curtails some of that activity, because it is, I see that happening a lot with people driving through downtown with the muffler. I think they just come down there just to hear the noise or something being, so I'm just wondering if that would be some type of deterrent to let them know that the fine, that they can be fined and that they will be able to, is that something you plan on doing? Changing the sign requirements?
Yeah, and one thing I'll answer that a little bit of a sidebar, similar to what we did start the conversation with. I'm glad you asked that question, because that's what I wanted to fill in on. Is ultimately the signage and the idea of getting that information out there is really about it's really about an awareness that you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, and education on that. Don't do this, right? And so there's ways that we want to do that. So we have to kind of step back and boil that down into the fact that what we're really trying to do is make an awareness and an education. One method for that we have talked about is signage, being able to publicly put sign up, and being in a downtown area creates a bit of a problem. Jessica touched on that. The sandwich board signs, we move forward with that, and then all of a sudden we're going to violate our own ordinances. And even if we could get our own permits for that kind of thing, it's still not relative to what our ordinance allows. So I think what we really need to think about is how do we provide that awareness and education in maybe something that's not physical, not tangible, and maybe there's a way that that there's a like a social media campaign. Maybe there's some way that we can get information out into the community, and it might be a regular basis. It might be pre-weekends. It might be whatever, before holidays. I don't know what that really looks like, but I think maybe that direction and just testing the waters to see if there is some sort of educational awareness method that's not a physical attribute.
Okay, I want to ask you a question. Now, what is the sandwich signs? What are those?
Yeah, so literally it's just it's an A-frame, it's just a board. Literally it was a sandwich because people used to wear them over their bodies, and the sign would say something on the front and something on the back, right? So they're really like an A-frame sign, and so it folds flat. Businesses, and we do permit that for certain businesses, right? There's restaurants and that sort of thing that they actually open up, and then they'll sit out there and they'll have maybe the today's menu or something like that. There are times when they are allowed, right?
But the other signs, say the blinking sign, sometimes that they put up in the area showing speed, certain speed, or you speeding or whatever. You can't use any of those type of signs. Maybe on the weekends when you have a heavy traffic with guys doing that, have some of those signs put up, which is sort of an education, but it's temporary, but it may still get the word out quicker than social media. Because a lot of people is doing that are not going to be on social media.
Exactly. And although it was brought up that their Instagram is usually even on their windows, right? And so that was a thought that we might be able to I don't know, see that and like send them an Instagram message or whatever. But yeah, I mean, a lot of this, and any time we're into awareness and education, it's generally multifaceted, right? There's always different ways that you have to come at it from different angles. There's never one single solution that does that. And I don't think we've landed on a solution. One of the signs last year when the noise advisory board brought this up was, can we bolt like a hard sign, I don't know, every other block to another sign or something like that. That's really kind of where we looked at that really creates a problem in our public works world. It creates a problem on roads that we don't own, right? Because a lot of our roads are DOT roads, and so that physical part of it. And I'm not saying that's the end of it, but just the two that we kind of looked at the closest were pretty problematic.
I have a question, Mark. Did staff look at the recommendation from the Noise Advisory Board on shortening the hours, the construction hours on Saturdays in residential zones?
We haven't dug into that too deeply yet. No, we have not. Okay.
And so the things that the staff recommended changes to clarify the commercial industrial zones, and to have greater definition on loud equipment outside. What I heard you saying is those are causing some regulatory issues anyhow for the zone enforcement officers. So are you all seeking guidance from us to say, yes, let's move forward with doing these ordinance changes that staff is recommending, or are those already in the works on their way towards council? What I'm trying to understand is, and to be just really frank, going through ordinance changes takes a lot of time and effort. And in an organization where we have, 6 council priorities from, we want to make sure that, if this is going to take 400 hours, I don't know, like I'm being a little facetious, but I want to understand the effort to reward ratio. And so it sounds like there's already effort being put into some ordinance changes. Okay. So and staff has already kind of weighed against your work plan, what that takes. And okay, so given that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about this recommendation from the Noise Advisory Board on shifting the window for construction hours in residential zones. Given that staff has already determined ordinance changes are fit into the work plan, it sounds like it could potentially just be an addition to that. So I'm just kind of curious if anyone else sees that. And if anyone's saying, Maggie, this is a bucket of worms that's going to cause the requirement for 400 public meetings with neighborhoods, I might not be as interested. But to me, it seems like a swift change while we're already doing ordinance changes that could just provide some relief. I mean, we've been getting emails from citizens who have this change could be really meaningful. So, and I might, so you're hearing my stream of consciousness as we do, I might ask towards Deborah or Mark, is my assessment that type of tweak could fit into the existing ordinance change work plan and would not cause a significant amount of time delay?
I'll let Mark respond, and then I may support him or I may not. Mark?
Yeah, thank you. Right, and so the work hours, and I think that's a good point. I think while we're moving, I think it is important that we work these definitions and get them to the point. This is really informational more than anything today. As we build that and agree that that's the way to go, basically internally, then we'll probably look for something affirmative one way or another, for that. But as far as the construction hours, honestly, that's a significant change. And honestly, we have a big construction industry within our community. I think there's a need to do that outreach and have that, that connection. But I also, I'm just saying that to say there is work that's going to come forward with that. but I'm not. I don't have an opinion that it's necessarily a bad idea.
And I think what we would like to do, thank you, Mark, exactly. We are not asking necessarily for any direction today. What we wanted to share with the update from the advisory board are things that are important to them as a board. What we have to do is then assess based on the gazillion priorities that we have organizationally and citywide, what level of effort and what do we need to work on? Okay, so we just had, as part of our management team meeting just 2 hours ago, a conversation about an organizational work plan coming back in June or July and saying, here's are the things that we need to work on, and here are our priorities that have been identified by boards or by council, in particular council in terms of their priorities. And then we will settle on, we think we have the capacity to move forward on these things. What I don't want, and Jessica mentioned this earlier, she said, we came to you guys in 2023 and we told you about these things and nothing has been done. I want to be sure that we are messaging, here's what we can do. And not overlook and not, shove it under the road, under the rug. Or I want us to come forward and say, these are the things of council that we feel comfortable from our staff capacity and resources and our priorities that we can work on moving into the next fiscal year. So we will be back sometime probably in July or August and update you all on here's the path forward for us with in particular these things, but a number of other things.
That's great. And Jessica, before you jump in, just want to say, I'm sensitive to what you're bringing up, Deborah. And Jessica, I think even earlier in your presentation, you mentioned that as well. We have a lot of priorities to juggle. Also, Mark, to your point of, it's just helpful to hear some of the context of reducing potential work hours by 2 hours on a Saturday is significant enough to engage the builder community. And that's the type of input that I need to hear from y'all, and that's very helpful. I'll also say that the idea has been floated around with some of us on PED about, we used to have builder forums, developer forums, so that we could understand what the big pressure points are. And so I think that type of conversation is helpful, so we aren't making a decision for one goal around X, Y, or Z without understanding the context and kind of zooming out a little bit. So I think as we consider ordinance changes like what Jessica's bringing and what staff is bringing, really understanding the broader context, because you don't want to do death by 1,000 cuts in any direction. So appreciate the back and forth and heard that today is informational. And thank you, Jessica, for letting me share that. What would you like to contribute?
First, I just want to say, Deborah, thank you for acknowledging that there's some, things that we brought to the table last year and still looking to get addressed. But one of the things I just want to say is for the Noise Advisory Board, we're always looking for points of leverage where we can actually have some sort of impact for the community, right? And noise is hard. I say this all the time, noise is subjective, and I don't mean that what's loud is loud, that loud is loud, but, I hate the sound of a pencil on paper. It's like nails on a chalkboard for me. Some people love that. ASMR, that's so, so finding ways, trying to be, this board and have people come to us and with these challenges and find ways to make an impact, to hear people out, make a difference. It's hard, it's challenging. And so this is one of those things. And I just want to say, we don't go into that lightly. We know that, like you're talking about, Maggie, there's a lot of other things of, having more housing and affordable housing is a huge issue. You can't have construction without having more affordable housing units on, in the market. So we completely recognize that. We also, are putting this out there to construction is a a big part of the business community here, just as music is. And we have challenges there too, right? With outdoor venues and that sort of situation. So I just want to say that, one, we recognize it. Two, the other thing about construction is because there's not decibel level limits, right? That's part of the concern. And so that's why we're hoping this might be a happy medium. Not saying don't do construction on Saturday, absolutely. But if there's some ways that it's not first thing in the morning for people on their day off, or at the end of the day when they're, hopefully trying to enjoy some time with their family, that maybe we can find a balance, because, some of the things in construction related, they're going to be over that 72 decibel level. You know what I mean? And it's definitely much more of that constant, noise making versus sound. So I just wanted to put that out there and just say, thanks for everybody's time and hearing us out on that.
Absolutely.
Well, definitely our follow-up is to make sure that we respond back to the board in particular, as well as to this committee in terms of what we think we are able to address and take on in the next fiscal year. And if nothing else, we can potentially say, may not be this year, but we think we can get to it next year. We just need to just close the loop. And we are committed to doing that this year. So thank you, Jessica, for your service.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this topic? All right. And I'm going to give folks another heads up. We're shifting into public comment. I'll remind you how, if you would like to do that, you can email me, and then I will share where this committee is going to buy you another minute or so if you want to get any comments in. So if anyone would like to make public comment, which is the 5th agenda item on our agenda today, you can email me, Maggie Ullman at avlcouncil.com. As of now, I do not have any public comment to my inbox. So I'll just go ahead and remind folks where this committee is going in June and July. And in June, we're going to be revisiting and looking at the solicitation ordinance update, potentially looking at an update to our municipal climate action plan, also looking at our stormwater master plan, which I'm very excited about, especially given how much rain we've had in the last 2 weeks. Whew, we are really facing some serious water pollution as we have challenges with climate change and increased rain. We'll also be looking at parks recreation. And then as we get towards July, we'll be looking at Parks and Recreation Master Plan, our Climate Justice Initiative, and really a recap of our environment safety fiscal year, which will be great. I think we've made some really important strides in the last year as a committee and as an organization. All right, with that, my last refresh on my inbox. And I have no public comment, so we'll deem there are no public comment for today's call. Thanks for bearing with us on that technical. I want to give a shout out to Katie. Thank you for doing a lot of backstage work to sort out and figure out that our public input service was down. I appreciate your quick hustle on that. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.